Ladies and gentlemen, I am you. And today we are going to ascend. At long last, DarkenedFantasies has joined the chat. And by chat, I mean lobby. I will be bringing you the action solo as Mesk was unable to attend. DF exited Group A of Ascension number 2 in first place. It was a very close group, you could say. All the games were fairly back and forth. He even dropped a match to Benno and came dangerously close to dropping a couple of other maps, or at least one other map from memory. The Shambler exited Group B in second place, but Group B was pretty stacked. It had Mesk filling in for Sublime, which obviously Mesk ended up going undefeated at the hand of some cheese, as well as some more standard games, as standard as you can play against Mesk anyway. But Mystery Meat took the crown, and he will be first seed going up against Benno in our second semifinal later today. And after all of that, we will attempt to play the grand final. Obviously, schedule's willing. It really depends. I don't imagine, for example, if Benno upsets Mystery Meat and goes to the grand final, I'm not actually sure he'd be able to play it immediately afterwards because it's quite late for him in Germany. But other than that, you know, we'll see how things go. We should be able to bang this one out. This is the semifinal matchup I'm most excited about because I think it is conceivably the closest of the two. DF has been practicing a lot lately, and Shambler, I'm not sure he's been able to by comparison. So we're going to see what all is gonna go down here. I'm gonna do our ready check while I pull up our pick ban for you as far as the maps are concerned. DF banned his own map, Maim Street, and then banned Infinite Velocity. And the Shambler banned Wellington and picked Boskevine. Now, this map is a map that both players are exceptionally familiar with. Okay, and generally speaking, I think DF is fond of the map. So even though the Shambler picked it, DF should be somewhat competitive as far as playing on it. But I don't think DF has gotten much Zerg practice lately, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. His Protoss versus Zerg, rather untested so far. So let's figure it out. I'm going to call the GLHF, and I'm going to initiate our very first match in the semi-finals, the playoffs of Ascension number 2. Remember that this is on the release version, and DF instantaneously getting a good split off. Meanwhile, Shambler in the top right as the light olive Zerg, he has relied a little bit on the auto-splitting. Automation, bro. Palatine Blue. That's a cute color that DF recently-ish came out with. One of the more recent additions to the color roster is some months ago, maybe a year ago now. Maybe not long enough that it's been a year, but it's been a while. And of course, Boskevine. I think it's safe to say that this map is close to a year old. I want to say it's been around for quite a while. So that's obviously by the Beaver 99, who is a contributor to the project. Even throws in some money every now and then. Hats off to you. If you want to support tournaments like these, Cosmonarchy Brood War in general, you can head on over to the coffee link in the bottom right-hand corner of the overlay. It's also in the description of the YouTube channel and should be in the Twitch panels as well. All that support really helps us out as we continue to try to make the greatest RTS experience that you've ever darn seen. Will be a gateway opener first. Meanwhile, Shambler going for a Hydrock opener almost certainly. Although I did say he floated a little bit of minerals there. He definitely could have dropped an egg morph there soon. So we're seeing a little bit of a warm-up here. I think he did just come straight into it, whereas meanwhile, I'm not sure if DF was warming up in, you know, versus AI or something. Which is actually an interesting point, because after this event, and we push to release and move on, I will actually be making a point to try to update the AI a little bit throughout this week. We'll see how that one goes. I also think the map pool will change quite considerably going forward. This seems like a very standard, you know, Shambler Larvosk timing here as soon as he gets a little bit more mineral income. His minerals are a little bit lower than he might be expecting because his Droleth is chasing the Scribe for a while. Which is not, I mean, it's not super significant that you do that. It's not like you need to catch the pylon warping in if there is going to be some kind of cheesy proxy. And I think at this point, Shambler is expecting to go into his Skithra Core heavy focus, although he's not harvesting gas from the Ridge, and they are 50 gas on this version of the game. So as his first Skithra Core does come out with the Larvosk Cesiant being completed, yeah, at this point we're going to see him just workering up, you could say. Now, his first unit, DF's first unit, is going to be an Ecclesiast. The significance of the Ecclesiast is hard to underpin because basically I think what DF has figured out here is that Drakedens, they're a little bit too slow and actually can be overwhelmed by skits So at this stage, I'm not sure what, I guess that was just a rally. At this stage, you know, Skither cores are going to be a little bit difficult to handle. I think Drakenins can focus them down quite well, but DF has found success using Ecclesiasts to battle them specifically. And with that Skither core being scouted out, it's actually still chasing the Scribe. Somehow, you know, lack of control or attention from the Shambler as he continues to macro up. And he is going to be building more Skither cores behind this. I don't think the Scribe will live long enough to scout this out, especially since eventually it's going to turn away. And yeah, there you go. It will finally be taken out. That means that he won't confirm there's more skiths, but he can be somewhat, you know, suspicious of that. This pile on finishing does mean that he can drop a Warden in his base. The Ecclesiasts have okay range, right? They have double the range of the Skither core, which means that there's really no chance that they can be outgunned, but the Drakenins are also on the way for the heavier range, and this one Zealot is going to guard against any Hydras that could be sent over alongside the Ecclesiasts, keeping them, you know, well attuned, right? And so the Skither cores will finish a Cenotaph first, so he's actually avoiding going for any Wardens or anything like that. It's smart play because he's conserving his resources here. The Drakenin finishes at the same time, so he does burst down a little bit of damage there. 40 damage being handed to that Skither core. Another one being slightly bruised. Nothing too significant just yet. We do have a forward Kagrant here, just to spread the creep, the Kagra, as it were, and he's turning that into a Circuit. That's going to be somewhat interesting because it's kind of in a weak spot, right? It can't super heavily defend the ramp, especially if you don't have vision on it. It does have a cliff advantage, of course, so there is that. But yeah, you're definitely in a bit of a pickle there if you end up getting charged up by gateway units, and that also means that that's one less worker mining and a slower expansion as a result. So Shambler maybe not being super optimal with his build. Meanwhile, still no Warden here, which could result in a couple of Scribe deaths, but the response time should be relatively quick here for DF. We'll see what he ends up doing. He should have scouted that out already, and yeah, before Shambler even pulls the trigger, the units are already here. I'd be surprised if he gets more than just 1 or 2 kills, and he might not even go for any of them, right? At this point, he does have 4 of them, so you can see him moving back and forth there, trying to micro out the wounded Skither cores. Ooh, barely doesn't end up getting one of them. A couple of parting shots here as double Warden in response. DF just not interested in dealing with that. And Shambler had enough to expand behind that, but unfortunately, it looks like... oh, here, we'll go ahead and try to fix that. Unfortunately, there is a problem for him in that he just immediately queued up more units, this time Hydras, looking to maybe bust the front, which again, these Wardens are not going to be as useful for protecting. So there is that. Some Legionnaires coming out. Yeah, with Legionnaires and Ecclesiasts, I actually don't think that Hydras will be enough here. He pretty much needs to pivot towards either Quasrock or Zorkis, and instead he's going to go ahead and try to build an expansion here. He's very late to that. He could be expanding twice over. And this is a stage where, you know, maybe his gas income isn't quite enough. He's going to queue up some more Hydras. So he's clearly going for a more, you know, ground-oriented approach, as DF is indeed going to move out. And, you know, he's got the Wardens and the, you know, units that are being built over here. The Skither core production has stopped, so it's not like they can even really burst that down, with many of them being bruised still, or at least a couple of them. So there will be a Protoss move out here. DF likes to use ground armies on this map. I've been on the receiving end of his repositioning here, and if you're not careful with how you approach it, it can definitely, you know, bite you. The Skither cores aren't even going to anticipate this army exactly. And Ecclesiast charging forward is going to be an expensive loss if not microed back, and indeed it will fall. But however, that might have even been intentional, using the Reclamation there, the Ascension, you could say. This is pretty funny. Vengeful Ascension is the name of the cornerstone. So that corpse consumption does end up helping him out quite a bit. Just charging up the ramp, dealing with one of the Hydras. Now, it's not just that he traded one Ecclesiast for a Hydralisk, it's also that he was able to trade it for map presence and control. And even that accidental sort of move there, where a couple of units ended up getting picked off by the superior numbers of the Zerg, allowed him to cancel this base at that point, right? And you can see here where the Circuit is not being supremely useful. Now, the Azira core will fall, this one kind of being a little idle. Skither core is joining the fight far later than they really should have. And really the question is, what does DF want to focus down on his way out? I think picking off some Skither cores is a good move. Great target selection there to make sure that he gets the wounded one, and that these Drakenins are going to be in a little bit of no man's land. Should have been recalled back home a little bit sooner, but it doesn't look like Shambler's going to punish. He's floating a lot of minerals and really wants to put down a hatch. I think at this point he should also build one in his base, just so that he doesn't have to worry about running out of larva, being able to repeatedly, you know, instantaneously droll up later on. And he's actually going to go ahead and send out yet another worker to expand. You can see his camera movement there going to the top left. Knows exactly what he wants to do. Now, I'm not actually sure if he corrected that. He is going to take the middle base. A bit of a gambit here, but we saw his success against Mystery Meat in his ZVT days back in both the Grand Finals of Ascension 1 and Group B of Ascension 2. He did it on this map, and the second round was a tech rush going into Bactalisks versus the army that Mystery Meat had. Now, at this point, definitely favor DF's Defender's advantage. Got lots of Drakenons, and I think that'll be more than enough to deal with the Skithricors, and maybe not for the Hydras, though. He's not microing them back too much, and he doesn't have that many units. I think he might have been caught off guard by the number of Hydras that are being built here. Now, he does have the ability to fall back to his Wardens, but again, they're in an awkward spot. He's going to cede all of his production. And at this point, he's got a Witness out, but it's not really going to help him out too much, and that might actually be enough once this pylon goes down, shutting down all of his gateways immediately. And GG is called, which is a little awkward because maybe there wasn't going to be too much kill pressure, although I guess on retrospect that pylon was there, but a very decisive move from the Shambler to just go straight into Hydra play, and the army wasn't there. There were no zealots there, right? You take another look at that army, you see only Drakenons. Well, they are going to lose the fight to Hydras, similar to Starcraft. So at that point, got to hand it to Shambler. He knows when his he has the killer instinct, you could say. So he is going to go ahead and take victory on Boskevine, a map that should have favored him in that context. He did pick it, so he had some plan. But nice to see a little bit of back and forth. A DF pylon indeed. And select the next map when you are ready. Apparently DF has had an eyeglasses cleaning problem. So, absolutely slapped. We're going to see what map he ends up selecting. Remaining maps are Crossguard, Equilibrium, Repulsion, and Terminus. And I will update the match score. I do expect this match to go a couple of places. I do expect to have more than 3 matches here, even though Shambler might be favored in most people's minds. So, just a note, just something that, at least my expectation, my storytelling of the event is certainly such. I had a hunch that Terminus would be selected next, and indeed that is going to be the case. I think DF has a plan for this map. He's played this map before in numerous occasions, in fact, against Zerg, and obviously it's not the Shambler Zerg, so it's a little bit different. But Terminus is a map where you can either be very aggressive with drop/airplay, or you can try to isolate areas of the map and just turtle up on 4 bases and get to the end game where DF is now famous, or perhaps infamous, for using Anthelians combined with Witnesses, really testing Shambler's ability to cover the map in Ovaleths and defenses to make sure that the Witnesses can't spot for those Anthelians. We are going to go ahead and kick off Map 2 in our first semi-final here. Thank you for joining us, of course. Cosmonarchy Brood War looks very different in many ways to the stock Starcraft, but it is worth noting that some of the things are just, they don't change, right? Witnesses, a cornerstone of Protoss, being able to fight against Zerg specifically. Obviously, Lakizalisk still demanding that sort of attention, our name for the Lurker. And on top of it, Hydras beating Drakenons. Who would have thought it? So the pylon will be warped in right underneath the Nexus here. Terminus is a more compact map. You can wall in here with a single gateway and then force your opponents to go all the way around to this ramp, moving all the way up to this ramp in order to gain access to your base. I guess technically you could probably wall that off with a Hatcheros too, although I'm actually not sure about that because it has lower collision than a lot of the other structures of the same size, but it's worth noting. And then in the middle here, we see a neutral Kagrant, neutral Pylon, and Crucible. They're all hanging out over here. And it doesn't look like Shambler actually wants to do anything with that. But it's nice of him to scout it out, so we reveal how that is. There's another one on the other side, XY symmetry. So it's a little bit of a bait, you could say. His build order looks a little bit refined this time around, getting the Hydrock Den and the Kagrant Cesian relatively in short order. And meanwhile, there will be a gateway opener here, scouted out by the Shambler's movement. He's almost pathed around it deliberately somehow. Second gateway going down, only momentarily blocked by the Drolith. Meanwhile, his scout getting tickled. Actually egos the the Shambler scout there. Pretty sure Shambler actually wins that fight, but you know. While we wait for this game to get underway, the Ecclesiast being the first unit of choice once again. DF clearly favoring that. It looks like it's going to be the bog standard, same as before. And we'll see what DF's response is going to be. On Terminus, again, you can play a little bit differently. You can be a little bit defensive, but you do have to cover your extremities. And that can be difficult against mass skiths if that is indeed what's going to happen. Not sure what DF was up to here. I think maybe he thought that the Drolith had moved over to his back base, but that's not the case. His scout will confirm the Skither Core. And there is at least one more going to be produced, almost certainly. Shambler almost has enough gas for it. He's actually only harvesting gas from the ridge with one worker, so we'll see whether that changes anytime soon. It's actually going to be a Hydra split, so this will be interesting. If DF immediately corrects with a bunch of Wardens in the back of his resource line to try to cover that, that could be pretty bad. But Hydras also finish a little bit sooner, and it could have been a little bit faster for DF to scout out. If he had gotten away from the Skith, he would have actually seen a Hydra be the next unit in response. So luckily for DF, he is going to, well, maybe not luckily, maybe it's just how it is. He's going to go ahead and rely on his units to defend him from early pressure. A Kagran Seas unit going to be almost certainly turned into a Circuith, but very far away from the ground over here, where obviously Drakeneds can just walk in here and start attacking your worker line. So we'll see if that ends up, taking shape. Skither Core is going to go ahead and poke in, see what happens. But the Hydras are not in position. They're just sort of rallying, holding for this double wide ramp there. See what can be done. A Warden will go down. It's probably fine for a single one to be there just as insurance, right? It means that a single Skither Core can't be the end of you. But Shambler is focused on making sure that he scouts out his opponent. A second Skither Core is going to come up. And yeah, at this point, you just move over there. And, Shambler is going to go ahead and escape. If the Hydras were in the same area and moved in, right, you could imagine that some tickling could have been done, but at this point, Shambler is more interested in just maybe playing a standard game. He's going to go ahead and expand at a more conventional timing than what was happening on Boskevine, and we'll see if that even ends up getting canceled. Some pretty good damage should be done here. Stutter stepping good, and one more shot will go ahead and kill the Skither Core, so there's only one remaining in play, which is all the way back home at this point. A second one has been made, and it looks like it's going to be Hydras for the rest of it. What DF doesn't know is he could definitely walk across the map and potentially go for a close here if he focuses down the Circuith and then sieges the Hydrock itself, sort of forcing action from the Shambler. We'll see if he feels strong enough to move out anytime soon. Definitely spending his gas, keeping his minerals low with Legionnaires, one of which is just queued up from the completed Cenotaph. And yeah, at this point, just two more Skither Cores coming out. Hierophants are a gas-heavy option, but if you're struggling with bands of air units, scouting you out and seeing what's going on, it can be useful to see, just to use the Hierophant out of the Cenotaph to see what's up. One Skither Core remains in the middle, providing overwatch, making sure nothing's moving through the middle of the map, which is the common path to take. Another Skither Core just scouting out for expansions. The only one he's not sure about is whether or not this has been taken. If he scouts that out, he'll be very confident in an economic advantage that is impending from the space that is just completed, although currently he has not transferred any workers yet. He is going to go ahead and move out with a band of Hydras. This looks to be about 10 Hydras, maybe 9, something like that. It's dangerous, but this army handily defeats it, particularly the more Legionnaires show up, causing confusion and surrounding some of the Hydras before they can realistically do anything. But if they hold on to the cliff advantage afforded by this ramp, that should give them a good amount of some sort of initial advantage, you could say. He is even going to go ahead and set up some hold positions there. He has not really started harvesting from his base, so his macro is slipping a little bit. Queuing up some more workers, rallying them to the closest base instead of transferring. So he's actually really heavily saturated in a healthy spot here, but he only has 2 workers on minerals here and not yet, harvesting any gas. So a little bit dangerous there. It looks like DF wants to just get a very sizable, maybe multiple control groups here. He's already over the first control group army and then maybe see if he can make a push. But if he goes through the middle, it'll be very telegraphed. And depending on how much larva is available, as well as the resources, maybe the tech as the Zorkish Shroud is being put together, that's going to dictate a lot of what happens here. He should still be more than capable of breaking this position, but I don't think he trusts himself. He's allowed the Skithacores to step in, but of course one of them just gets popped immediately. And the Hydras are even going to go ahead and retreat, funnily enough. DF has some idea of what he wants to do here. Moving to the side, maybe looking for any other units. And now he's going to move around. So these two Hydras are still in position to accept this attack, while the other ones are falling back to maybe defend from the choke. And they will need to reposition. But as soon as these two Hydras pop, the Zorkish Shroud, I don't think it's within range buffed Drakenen attacks, range or whatever. I feel like even with the cliff advantage, you still can't attack that, but that could be something of a time-sensitive situation there. A second Warden has even been put down, and more units are being trained. Drakenen's moving through the front. Ground units, just scouting out what's going on there. Not sure if that was a bad move, like, moving your units incorrectly or what have you. But he is going to go ahead and reveal some of the units here and fall back from that position. Maybe he'll make the trip all around. At this point, Shambler's kind of in the dark as to where the units really are. He's given up a lot of map control. More units have been rallied down, and they are going to go ahead and A-move to this mineral-heavy base on the high ground. And again, as more structures go down, another pylon here, a third cenotaph there. It should be noted that Shambler does have a considerable amount of an advantage going into the economics, right? He's drolling up over on his natural in the back base. So he should be able to reinforce here. He only has Hydras. He's let a lot of his air units sort of slip up. And some of the ground units are still enduring. The melee units in particular are still enduring. Unit control a little bit sloppy here from DF. A Lekizalisk will burrow down. So that will probably put an end to the initial aggression. But if Shambler's not careful here, he can indeed get picked off, because that Lekizalisk doesn't have the range that these Drakenens will, particularly once the units start falling down. And if DF can just camp up here and start whittling down the positions of all of Shambler's units, like at what point do you need to, park your units a little bit further away? Some Legionnaires are going to come off to the side. It's not a bad move. Zoryuthileths are going to eat up a lot of the initial shots, and some more units are going to be sent to the fray as a result. But the Zoryuses are going down. The Drakenen's trying to focus down the Hydras and vice versa, but there's a lot of chaos here and more units rallying from the right-hand side. So I think the Tier 1 all-ins, if you can even really call these all-ins, but the very aggressive Tier 1 moves are being quite successful here, and that Lekizalisk even taking some damage initially. At this stage, DF might feel like he can just walk right up on top of it and reveal it that way. He's trying to focus down the Zorkis, but instead he's going to fall back, maybe pick off some of these workers that have been accidentally rallied into the battle, or incidentally perhaps. More Drakenens here, more units coming in from the right-hand side. That Circuit has been remorphed, lots of money being floated from either side. All of their focuses are on these battles, and a lot of units are going down here. DF still behind in worker count, but clearly ahead in terms of military, has 10 more units, make it 9 than his opponent as far as military is concerned. That Zorkis will be focused down. A couple shots onto the Lekizalisk. Indeed, it will also fall. And while Shambler might be able to survive here, I don't know if he's able to long-term. And even then, I'm not even sure he's able to kill these Drakenens. The GG might end up coming out pretty soon, even though he's got plenty of money. He just can't spend his minerals specifically. No more Zorius available. Just his Aziricores if he wants to build some mineral-only units. Could certainly be putting down some colonies, some Cesients in the same time, and he's pulling the workers to try to ward those units off. But every Hydralisk killed is just more money having to be spent on that, and DF, he had more units over here that he wasn't even using, so he can just walk right in here and kill the Circuit. The reinforcements are definitely going to be too much for Shambler to handle at this point, particularly with the Circuit not focusing down the Ecclesiasts. It's going to take a long time for him to kill those Legionnaires being repeatedly enchanted by the Ecclesiast passive. The workers are once again, pulled off the line, but there's just no units here for him. Aziracore is finished, a couple of them in fact, but they're rallied onto a worker instead of being rallied onto the ground, so they don't actually get too many shots off before being focused down. And at this point, he's fighting with almost pure workers and nothing else. Yeah, he might, kill a couple of these units, but the reinforcements are almost certainly going to be too much. A witness even made here for good measure. We look back at his base just momentarily. We see there were more structures added, more units being made, and even though all the money was being floated, DF fires back in a Tier 1 battle, crushing the Shambler's forces. Despite the economic advantage, again, I think a lot of that could have been handled if he had maybe built some Cesients in the front line while the battle was going on, force DF to pick between, stopping the defenses from going up or, actually killing the units that were attacking him. So some very high action games here, and maybe shorter running times than we might have expected. But such is life when you're able to pick some of the shorter distance and more action-packed maps. Remember, we have Equilibrium and Repulsion still in the map. We have Crossguard technically still in the pool as well, which can go either way. And so pretty soon we're going to be into more macro-oriented territory, I have a feeling. Unless maybe these players really want to stick to one side of that. So let's go ahead and update the map score and wait for Shambler to pick the next map. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to make everybody's day a little bit brighter. Welcome to the stage, IskatuMesk.
Hi.
What's up, dude?
How are you guys doing?
Pretty damn good. We just went back and forth, 1-1 currently, with DF and the Shambler hitting very fast tier 1, army-sized timings, critical mass on a couple of units. I think in both cases, the player who lost the match, Shambler picked up the first one on Boskevine by hitting a mass Hydra timing, and DF went for a very mixed gateway army, Drakened, Zealot, Ecclesiast, and Legionnaire. So he had some pretty good sets there as well, just overwhelming the position. And so in both cases, I think the player who lost was trying to make a transition into some other, better tech or something like that, maybe more economic game. And they ended up just getting, occupied pretty heavily by that. But in this particular matchup, we're seeing things be fairly explosive. So Crossguard has been selected for our map 3, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the casting booth, so to speak.
Yeah, it's been a mess. Has Crossguard been updated since we last, in Ascension 2?
Yeah, we're still on Ascension 2, so it's technically the same map, but I have already made changes to it to deal with like the silly anchor spot, for example.
Yeah.
So, as well as some other minor things. So, yeah, in this particular case, it's actually what Benno picked against Mystery Meat for the starter map. So I told him, I was like, yeah, care for anchor cheese then, buddy, because I haven't changed the map.
Sorry, I got the hoof wrong here. It's
there
you go.
You figured it out.
Call out to the bronies.
There it is. And okay.
So when I think DF, I think back to the Anthelian Rush.
Yes.
A classic.
Well, we'll see if he can do it on Crossguard, because in this particular case, it is the last remaining map in the pool that I think you can pull off, really heavy tier 1 aggression. In the other cases, Equilibrium and Repulsion, they are more macro-oriented maps. And even this one, we've seen in the TVTs, Crossguard can also be a macro-oriented map. So we immediately have double gas mining from the Shambler in the bottom right. And that probably means a Zorkiz rush. I think maybe he's going to go for Lakizalisk drop onto that, gimmick ledge. But again, that's going to be less effective than anchors with Cyprians in them. So yeah. I'm not sure that that'll be very useful for him. But we'll see what DF plans to do if he's aware of that.
I mean, DF did hard turtle into Star Sovereigns on this map. So I don't think that's going to be as effective against Shambler, who's more aggressive early on, though, than, what was it, Benno?
Yes. Yeah, Benno as Terran, just having a couple diadems here and there, but also loads of Mavericks, as per usual. Yes. I'm excited for that. I'm glad that you can make it, theoretically anyway, for semifinals number 2, where Benno will surely defeat Mystery Meat with about 10,000 Mavericks.
Oh, that's going to be, Benno is going to bring the meat, and Mystery Meat's going to bring the mystery. So there's definitely going to be a synergy, and he's definitely waiting for his Zorka. Yep, there it is. There
it is. So DF's playstyle for the opener has been incredibly stable. He's always gone for double gateway into double cenotaph, maybe even triple cenotaph at some times, or triple gateway, one of those two. So he's really heavily focused in on that, and he's almost always gone Ecclesiast first against Shambler. I think that's a change for specifically because of the Zerg factor. But maybe when he scouts Zorkis first, he might change that, because I think that was a thing specifically to keep workers alive when they were being harassed by Skiths. But his general defense against that Skith opener has been very successful. I think that's why Shambler is going to go ahead and pivot away from that.
Yeah, I was just last night, I was checking through some of the old school 1999 professional videos.
Right.
And it was kind of like you didn't have the super polished micro and like it was ZVP that I was watching, and it was so different than obviously what it eventually became, where it was like fast expanded Corsair, and then you didn't have like the attack moving, attack patrolling, and the micro and stuff like that. Like my micro was better. And it kind of, there was a lot of like analogs I noticed immediately to CMBW. We had, what was it, mystery pulling workers, a huge chunk of workers for early aggression or something like that. Like there was some of that going on. And it was just, I felt a lot of deja vu watching that. Oh, it's going to be the Lekizalisk drop.
Yep, indeed. And I believe the Lekizalisk was spotted by DF's Scribe Scout. So it's a question of what he wants to do in response. He's actually gone for Gateway into Cenotaph instead of double Gateway here. So, obviously, Legionnaires, they don't last too long against the Lekizalisk.
He's moving out, though.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't spot it.
He might. Well, he might also know that, like, as a result of this, there's not going to be much at home, right? So he could maybe just walk in here, micro around the Lekizalisk that's going to be put down, and it's going to be a Circuith instead of a Larvosk, so that might throw him for a loop here, but he can just park the Drakenid behind the mineral line, right?
He definitely saw that Lekizalisk, I'm sure of it, so the question is if he saw the Ovalith.
Right.
Because he doesn't have any defenses in, and it's about to drop. He's going straight for that top ledge.
Of course he is.
Again, of course he is.
It doesn't benefit from cliff advantage.
He's doing this just because I'm here. I knew it.
Yeah. It's not going to benefit much from cliff advantage, so the biggest problem is that
it'll be a nuisance for his gas.
Yeah, you can shut down gas mining from at least the geyser, probably also the ridge. And I'm not sure there's going to be much counterplay to it, just purely because, I mean, he can afford an embassy and a witness off of the current gas count. But we'll see what the response is, so...
Currently, the response is nothing. Maybe bewilderment. Yeah, bewilderment.
So again, he can put down an embassy right now, but you know you can't get up there without a transport, right? So he's just gonna have to micro his workers back on the back line, and I don't know what he's planning on doing.
He's gonna soak the spines, you know.
Bug? What? Question mark? Maybe he wants to kill the Ovalith or something? I'm not really sure what he was planning on doing there.
I'm not sure, but... yeah, you gotta be standing on him to see him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I mean, he could still technically just walk into the enemy base, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
I mean...
Oh, he's building an embassy. He's not given up completely yet. Well, I say that, but he's going to go ahead and pull his
no, the Alden's going to come a little late. There's like 2 Lekizalisks and some other shit waiting here. I mean, I think what I would have done at that point is just like build a Nexus or something, mine from the one part, and then just wait it out, because... he's going to take a while to really pick up steam elsewhere because he had to devote so hard. If you don't lose like 30 workers to Lekizalisk, then,
well,
you know,
the
you
plan
can kind
is,
of pull off of that.
I think what he can do, if he can spot the enemy Lekizalisks, again, doing it with workers is a real bad idea. But
yeah, there's 2 Circuiths and 2 Zorythaliths and 2 Lekizalisks. A third. Oh, that's a...
it's going to be a Larvos, yeah. But
yeah,
it's still, this is too much. Like, you can't focus the Zoryus down before they spawn a million, you know, Rillarokors, right? So
this is going to be Tism either way. Here it is.
I think it's... I wouldn't be surprised
his units have taken so much damage. If he hadn't lost a lot of his units to the first one. And he goes.
Well, he was going to go ahead and try to reveal the Lekizalisk, but yeah, it's going to be too much there. So I think at this point, the GG is going to be called. Not prepared.
Oh no, the scribes.
Not prepared.
Oh, it's a massacre.
Well, no GG in fact, but that's okay.
Well, Crossguard claims another with its ledge. I hope the Mystery Meat watches this.
Of course.
And smiles. They are now brothers.
Absolutely, Slab.
You know, that's why the first thing I heard Crossguard, I wondered.
Yeah, well, that must be why he
I was
picked
just thinking
it, right?
that ledge.
Yeah, yeah. So that's already been removed in the pre-released version.
That's a little more manageable than an anchor, because again, you're gonna lose gas mining, but you can choose to expand or all in.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna lose your nexus and stuff right away to that. You could try to put an embassy up there. You still have to have some gas. So if you didn't have the gas for it, then it's still gonna take a little while. But
well, yeah, the thing is, he had the gas
for approach to it.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. If he had the gas for the he had the gas for the embassy. I think he only needed a little bit more to get a witness out of it. And considering how heavily punished the Shambler's economy was for doing that play, like it can really only catch somebody off guard once, and then there's so many different ways you can fight it. But obviously, we don't think that it's a good thing to have in the game, or else we would keep the map as it was, and that's been changed.
Yep. So. Well, you learn. You get cheesed. You contract the tism. You make a Reddit account. And then life is over.
Pretty much.
Well, I wonder if DF can counter cheese now. Will he come out of this with some kind of brand of cheese wheel in his mind? Exact revenge? Restore equilibrium? Or will the cheese have conquered his soul?
Yeah, we might get.
Need
listen,
new shoes.
We could conceivably get our first 5-game series in the playoffs. It's possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think this map is as easily cheesable.
Nope.
We're
down to the macro maps, basically. The one ramp into one choke, fairly defensible, right? Both of these remaining maps made by Veek 7, Equilibrium. Pending some updates, he actually just sent me some updates recently. But obviously, we're not going to change the map in the middle of the tournament.
Yeah.
Even despite how silly Crossguard is when people abuse the ledge versus others who don't know how to do it.
Somehow I can't see this map and think of nothing else but anchors landing on these ledges for some reason.
Yeah. Must have been because Kean... Well, actually, he didn't do it on this map. He did it on Repulsion and on Wellington. Poor Benno.
Yes, Kean. Double gas mining again for Shambler. Could be very much the exact same thing.
On this map, he likes to go to Gorgorcore or Skiths, so it probably depends on that. He's very close to being able to afford a Hydrock, but it's going to take a little bit longer for a Zorkis. We'll see what he ends up doing. I guess he must be a Zorkis because he's still banking.
Yeah, he's banking.
Yeah. No,
now that I'm here, you get a case of the Canadas.
Classic.
And it's a Hydrock. It's a late Hydrock.
It is, yeah. He was a little late with it in the first matchup, too, so his timings are a little bit off. Still mortal, perhaps.
Well, maybe it was because he's waiting if the earliest scout was coming. And he didn't want to go Zorkas if it was going to get scouted.
Yeah, that could have been it. That could have been it, too, because he did... I think his scout might have seen the DF scout at that point.
Because they crossed each other, and then that's about the time he went to Hydrock. So.
Yeah. Well, a gateway into Cenotaph once again.
That's it. I still think that he could have gone Zorkas because maybe the Gorgorcores wouldn't have done too much damage, but they might have forced DF to build really defensively, and that can still waste a lot of his time. So maybe he's just going to spam Hydra instead, since that apparently worked in one of the earlier matches I wasn't here.
Yes, in the match Boskevine, he was able to take victory over DF's gateway army by... there was some play where DF was able to cancel an expansion attempt and put Shambler back on one base. And Shambler's response was just to build super heavy into military instead. And that didn't really get scouted until it was too late as a result.
Double Skiths.
Now the first one will be scouted out by the Scribe. And at this point, DF, again, he wants to see what the other egg unit is, right? Although he's pathing away from it, so... He's not going to see it hatch until maybe it's already gone. Yeah, looks like it. He does have a Dracoden and a Warden already on the way. The Dracoden finished, Ecclesiast on the way, and Warden is probably going to be about halfway done when this Scythocore shows up. So nothing will actually be accomplished by this first Scythocore. Getting warded off with the initial shot.
Ecclesiast and Legionnaire. Now, Shambler going to keep building military, or is he going to start building economy? It seems like he's just really intent to spam skits at the very moment. Oh, there's some Jorless, so...
Yeah, he's been...
probably going to be content just to hang on to the map presence for a little while.
Yeah.
It's not really too much he can do to the base at the moment.
No, I mean, that Warden protects against... 3 Skither cores can break it down, but it's obviously going to delay long enough for the ground units to reinforce. However, each one of them is 150 minerals, the Warden, that is, so it's costly if you force your Protoss opponent to occupy their mineral line that way.
Yeah. But you don't really want to trade a Skith for it, so...
Yeah.
It's definitely not cost-effective for you to do that. Just kind of looking around here, seeing what the army composition is, maybe tickling it a little bit.
Hey, he's not able to get any hull damage, and instead gets bruised on multiple Skither cores. So all the Legionnaires are full HP still. And a Hierophant has been started, so that's going to help, catch off 1 or 2 of these Skither cores at a time, depending on target selection. And it is Mass Skith. A second Kagran going down for presumably another Circuith. That is going to stop DF from being able to move up the ramp and attack, most likely, although Legionnaires are surprisingly efficient at getting up there because of their jump, and then Ecclesiast can also keep them healthy, so they don't do a crazy amount of damage to the 3 armor circuits, but they can cover enough. And a Matrix being put down by the gas as well for DF, so... both of our players are being very conservative on the base side. They're not really expanding or setting their sights on expansions. It's just going to be, slow military production for both sides.
Now Shambler has to be really careful here because the Hierophant taps something, it could die pretty easily.
Yep. There's enough Drakedons here to punish any slip-ups there, any faulty engagements.
He's just committing hard into skits, I guess. Maybe he wants to drop down a second pylon because this one pylon is
it's powering everything.
It's gonna have sore shoulders soon.
Yeah. Well, DF
moves out, he could lose everything.
DF has done this a few times now, actually, and he will be moving out. So this is definitely dangerous. There are 7 Skither cores. I think even without the pylon being so vulnerable, that could handle everything he's got there. So it really
he's got a second pylon. It's okay.
Yeah, that'll keep the defenses powered, not the gateway, if the first pylon goes down. But it's just about to be finished. And that Ecclesiast
he chooses the gateway first.
Yeah. Well,
the army isn't home, and Shambler must be realizing, they must be going towards.
Well, there's still like 5 of them over here. Yeah, there's still 5 of them over here. So having to get up the ramp versus the defenses. Again, the Ecclesiast keeping those circuits, the Legionnaires rather, alive. One Skither core's already gone down. The other circuit being whittled down as well. And a bit of botched micro here from the Shambler. He has to pull back his Skither core horde. Still not very good as far as the overall army composition is looking like, because at this point we're seeing DF having pretty much lost or killed nothing of substance, right? Just some military units. Another third warden or third defensive structure going down.
A couple of skits went down and some melee went down, but the DPS got kind of split and he didn't really have enough ranged units to deal with the skits, even the first set of them. So they were able to get a lot of fairly free damage in.
Yeah, again, botching the micro a little bit here. Definitely wants more Drakedons, for sure. The Hierophant getting focused
Matrix getting in a little bit of damage here.
Yeah,
but
if the Hierophant had stayed alive, that would have helped him out quite a bit, because suddenly you're going to get punished quite heavily for any misplays there. Shambler is expanding
away by the 16 HP Drakedon.
Yeah, no, not for long.
Lost 2 skits for that. I'm not sure if that was really the best trade, but maybe he just really wants this gateway. He is going to get it. Yeah. That Hierophant only was just started. Yeah. The other one's halfway done, so. Both players have got a lot of money in the bank.
Yep.
DF can't really do too much with it at the moment. A couple of extra wardens might be enough to stop the bleeding, but Shambler taking the expansion, putting himself pretty firmly in the lead at this point.
Yeah, you need to see
24 workers.
Probably Grand Libraries going down here for DF, so you could grab some Atriuses and deal with the stacked air threat. But it's just going to be more Cenotaphs. After a certain point, they get to a very strong position, and with the double expansion going down, okay, there's a window of time.
There's a Grand Library. Yeah.
There's a window of time here where if DF...
He has to protect these, though. They're kind of far away from his defenses, and that Grand Library, I think, might be able to be picked off without the Warden being able to defend it. So
from the top,
there could be a repeat of the what just happened if he is not careful here.
Yeah, the
really
SimCity is not. Yeah, the SimCity has not been superb. Oh, that Drakenid's not long for this world.
Not one Drakenid's down. He worked so hard for it.
Again, a little bit of a botched micro here from the Shambler. He's giving his opponent quite a few shots here. And you can see the power of the Hierophant as well, although he might have baited himself in there. They don't do great amounts of damage to the Skithricors, but they definitely help manage the retreats, the swing in and swing out.
Yeah, it's basically every time Shambler moves into the defenses, the Hierophants guarantee at least one kill out of it, sometimes two.
Yeah, in this case, it was actually 3 shots because of the Drakenid didn't even go down, so that was very cost efficient. And there is an Atreus on the way from the completed Grand Library. Again, there's a lot of units coming up for the Shambler, though. He's got a band of Hydras marching around now that he's got his natural up and running and a 3rd base completed. He's even got, Skithricors in place for catching any envoys or any sort of cheeky drops that might be happening. A couple of Wardens going down. DF really trying to spend his minerals.
There's still some Legionnaires there, which help pull out the Hydras for a short time, but since he's not fighting on top of his defenses, there is not much damage coming out of those Skiths.
And what we are seeing is a great synergy between the Atreus and the Hierophants because they slow down the units and prevent them from escaping the splash. But at this point, I think it's probably going to be GG with that Matrix going down. And unfortunately, I think, well, I say that. I mean, the Wardens are still staying alive. The workers could be pulled to deal with the Hydras, but they're not going to really do anything. And those Wardens may be warping in under the cover of darkness in plain sight. Somehow Shambler didn't see it. So DF will hold on. Admittedly, I'm not sure for how much longer.
The March of the Scribes. There's so many more Hydras going to be on the way.
And nothing coming out of the Grand Library
hold them off forever. You know, a Kentavis would be great in this circumstance.
I think
to hold that ramp.
Yeah, he's really struggling with the fact that
he has no gas, though.
He's got no gas, and he's spending it all on Hierophants. Although he's switched away from that now. So, with sending more of his workers back, he's rebuilding the Warden. I could see him being able to put it down, and there's just so many Hydras. He definitely wants the Legionnaires, and he's wisely building more of them. So, yeah, that absolutely can help. He's even going to go ahead and provoke Shambler to come up the ramp, which, if he's not careful, could be a problem. If a unit dies with the red overlay on it from the Hierophants, they actually increase the attack rate of nearby Protoss allies, so that's a pretty good attribute to have there. And at this point, the chonky units of the Protoss are going to be getting pretty powerful. That Atreus getting a lot of spread damage, but he does have to kite it backwards because it will be focused down. And second Warden does finish. Not really able to focus down the pylons, instead changing targets to the Warden. He's only good for one of them right now. He's going to go back in for the other, but I think at this point, we're definitely going to be able to see these Hydras. They're so bruised. They will almost certainly be focused down and taken care of. And that Atreus backed into a corner, but obviously the double Warden in the back is even able to help out there. So costly for DF, but I would hazard a guess to say that a lot of Hydras ended up dying, perhaps unneededly. At the same time, more are on the way, and DF does have to be careful.
Yeah, it was a pretty good trade monetarily for DF, but since it's 1 base versus 3, Shambler can be afforded to be a little wasteful at the moment.
Yeah.
So long as he keeps up the pressure, eventually it's going to be too much.
That being said, DF has come back from worse situations I've seen in the past. And
Shambler doesn't want to run in with only 1 control group of Hydras, because it's not enough to break that.
Not anymore, yeah. However, at the same time, the base is starting to mine out for DF. He desperately needs to secure his expansion here.
Now, Shambler has a lot of minerals, but he doesn't have the gas for tier 2.
He doesn't have them. Yeah, he's not really spending any of his money on anything other than Hydras at this point, and some of them are even haplessly waypointing themselves into enemy threats here. Oh, Legionnaires are getting
kind of at the point where he kind of wants tier 2 to deal with this at this moment. The Protoss is getting to be quite heavily dug in.
Yep.
And the more Atreuses show up, the less effective Hydras and especially Skiths are going to be. But no, he's going to go right for big men. All of his money went into Zero Corps.
Okay, well that's the minerals. He still banked quite a bit of gas. 900 will give him the break point there. And yeah, I think at this point, if DF doesn't recognize how powerful his army has actually become, if he gets a couple more Legionnaires with this force, and he still has at least a couple, maybe he only has one Ecclesiast right now, but a couple of them could definitely help him out quite a bit. He doesn't have his normal map control, right? That's something that he's lacking right now.
And he's getting an embassy. Probably looking to see maybe what Shambler is doing, but Shambler is now finally getting the IRL Iris. A little late, but you know, if he just sits back and waits for a little while, denies this Nat, you can turn all those Hydras into Bactalisks, and then at that point, it's going to be just pretty much impossible to stop. They'll just melt through the Legionnaires and anything else that gets close to them. But this ledge could be a little bit of a problem with him, depending on how he approaches it. So,
I like the positioning of the Legionnaires. I think the Izira Corps spotted it. Not sure. But that does mean that they can just flank immediately and, you know, make a move if necessary. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the IRL Iris...
DF has spotted all the big men.
Yeah. What's he want to do
about
it?
They are very big. And there is a lot of them.
Still not able to expand just yet.
I think Shambler is waiting for tier 2. Maybe he's looking maybe to just kill these that are over here. Which he does.
Oh, he sees all the other ones too, though. And again, the Izira Corps are able to spread all of their splash on it. So...
Oh, the Broad Izira Corps was discovered.
The Ecclesiast also helped most of those Legionnaires stay alive, so this army could be forfeit depending on the engagement. Some of the Ecclesiast getting focused down by Hydras, but then their aggro switches over to the Legionnaires. Front lines aren't finally fallen, but I think it's enough because obviously all the Izira Corps have also been taken care of. And again, I mean, the Witness is going to spot out the remaining Hydras. DF can have some confidence in maybe just moving down to that third base, and, you know, suddenly, even though Shambler's got a fourth in the middle of being set up, it could be, you know, too much for him to handle if he loses some of his satellite bases. DF still hanging on by a thread here. Has lost a decent number of his more expensive units, and it is going to take longer for him to build those back up.
Yeah, so that fight definitely happened a little sooner than what Shambler wanted. I'm pretty sure Shambler was waiting for Bactalisks. But only now is the Hydrock Den starting to morph. And he lost quite a bit even on an open fight, which should have been in his favor given the state of the map. And at this stage, he has to kind of stop this bleeding. And these units are still really valuable for DF because he still doesn't have a base. So Shambler can still bleed him out and absolutely come out of this.
Yeah, the Ecclesiast definitely buying a lot of time with their passive, and I think all the front line is going to evaporate here. Remember that if the Hydras are going down, that's more money that has to be spent in order to access the Bactalisks in the future. This Atreus will actually take out all of these Hydras thanks to its splash damage, so it can then go back to maybe weighing in on this Tatros, but he's just going to reveal even more Hydras at that point, and then maybe DF will go ahead and fall back with his foresight. Well, maybe not. He might be a little bit slow on that. There you go. He's figured it out.
Yeah, and DF overextending a little bit there.
But the Bactalisks are on the way, and as you're saying, Mesk, that's probably going to be GG. There's still not been an expansion.
Yeah, I don't think DF realizes just how much of an economic difference there is. I mean, Shambler doesn't really have that many workers.
Yeah.
His bottom right isn't really mining. But the gas income alone is a tremendous difference. And the fact that a lot of the bases he's mining from are not mined out.
Yep, absolutely.
So his income is just probably going to be like triple that at the minimum for what he has in the moment. And there's lots of Bactalisks coming. DF is finally taking his Nat, but I think he's going to get swamped. Swamped in crooked green dongs.
Got to be careful about those. I mean, Shambler's actually taking a little bit of time before he, you know, pulls the trigger on any of these.
Yeah, he had some struggles with his initial attack, so he's probably like, well, I want to be sure that this wins this time.
Again, Cantavis would help him massively if DF intends to hold, but his Nexus is only halfway done, and the Bactalisks are already on their way. He had selected the Grand Library, but hasn't queued anything, so I don't know that we're going to see anything of note. Atreus's are going to go ahead.
Cantavis is a little harder to use against Bactalisks because of their range, so...
And now,
still, though, it would be good on this ledge.
Yeah.
The crooked dongs are unleashed, spinning through the air. And everything just instantly melts, and that is GG.
Well, besides the one cheese game, I think it was fairly back and forth. And I'm sure DF is thinking to himself, well, what if I didn't, you know, get cheesed? And that makes sense. You know, you're always going to be a little bit salty when you die to cheese, especially in a tournament. But all in all, Shambler will make it to the Grand Finals, presumably to set up a rematch of what we had the first time around. And holy shit, it's Mesk, indeed.
Aye.
We were talking about how pretty soon I can implement config specific, like users can config to change their advisor if they so desire. So I can actually add more of them in and then use them for all of the events and stuff.
Oh, are we gonna make it so you can buy advisors like in that one Riot mobile game? What was it, League of Legends? Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were just gonna say, StarCraft 2, since they do let you do that.
Oh yeah, and StarCraft 2. God, Blizzard really did just tick all the cancer checkboxes, didn't they?
And speaking of ticking cancer checkboxes, how do you feel about that series that you watched?
I'm glad that the first thing I walked into was that ledge being abused again.
Got him.
That was some shit. It was interesting to see DF hold out in that last game, though. Shambler has sometimes, like, I was able to sometimes pull wins off of him in kind of sort of the same way by being able to push it later into the game where, like, you could see in this match, again, a lot of the bases were kind of idle. There was some idle workers here and there. You would sometimes get a little caught up trying to multitask stuff, especially if something he figured was going to be more successful than it was turned into a big mess, and then he suddenly turned things onto him. Then he, at that point, his mechanics kind of start to suffer. Right. But DF got a little too greedy off of that because, Shambler still had a huge chunk of the map, still had a huge economy, and was still that far ahead. And, it was very presumptuous to think he could take out so many of these bases or really even attack these bases at all just because he destroyed the one army. I think just holding on to what he had, reinforcing, and then trying to turtle. And, at that point, it was still a huge climb upwards, but hoping for more bad engagements could have, at that point, to have something better to jump off of and then go on the offensive would have helped. But his army being like Atreus's, Drakenens, and then some melee, going out in the open is, as soon as he's attacking a base, he's going to get attacked from all sides. Like, at that point, it didn't really matter what Shambler built. Whatever he built was going to be difficult to deal with because it was just going to be so much of it. And it just really wasn't an army at that point that was going to scale that well across an extended period of time because it just really wasn't super mobile. So, like, Atreus has already kind of struggled against ground units just because the Hydras can kind of, like, just split up, and then their splash is not going to be that major. The Atreus's were more useful against the Skiths and kind of shut out the Skiths right away. But Shambler being engaged at that point was a really important timing victory, but that victory really only lasts as long as you're able to not lose your investment, because for DF, the investment was still so high that... Yeah. The moment he started losing it, it didn't really matter what Shambler lost at that point. The losses were just too great in comparison to him.
Yeah, I think the problem is that he was just so far behind, and then based on the depletion, he couldn't keep up the production that he did have, and was even adding more production, which makes sense if you don't factor in the depletion, right? If you just imagine your economy remains steady. Well, he was adding more gateways and more cenotaphs, right? And so, and even the embassy. And I know that DF likes, as a player, his playstyle is definitely very stable, right? He loves to have the vision across the whole map. We saw that in Group A. And then, of course, he does appreciate the Anthelian moves, right? On a map like Infinite Velocity, which it's kind of funny that, that map allows you to do so much with him. And he decided to ban that map here. So I wonder if maybe he didn't want to prepare for whatever Shambler cheese might be happening in there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're talking about the cheese match, and I thought that was scouted, but it might not have been quite in range. I think that if you see the Zorkes with Shambler, you just have to assume. I mean, it's going to be either Gorgakors or Lekizlis, but if you don't see Gorgakors immediately in your base and it's been up for a little while, it's probably safe to assume that there's a Lekizlis somewhere. And that isn't to say he would have been able to easily stop it, but not letting all of his workers die to it would have been a start of managing it, because
Right.
it's really like a game of managing it. You have to limit its ability to deal damage to you, and that's mostly like moving out your workers, losing some mining time if you have to, particularly the gas, and then like making an expansion somewhere else, and then mining off of that.
Yep.
Right, and like you're gonna be behind, but Shambler is also gonna be kind of behind. At that point, you just have to manage for when it repositions, and if it goes off that ledge, then you have ways of dealing with it.
Right. Yeah, I think it's also a case of familiarity. Like the cheese is an example of, oh, I didn't know that this thing could work that way or whatever. Just like how Nablime didn't know that you could stand over it to reveal it in one of his matches against the Shambler, where he did the same thing. It's a similar situation that happened in the last tournament during the semifinals matchup that Shambler had against Nablime. And I also think that extends to, you know, what you were talking about with Shambler slipping, thinking he was so far in the lead. And maybe DF slipping in game one, where he cancels the Hatrosk and then doesn't expect the Mass Hydra follow-up as even a possibility, perhaps. It's like players are still getting accustomed to what happens in CMBW as far as the economy goes. How far behind are you really? And not only that, but like, what can you do? What are your capabilities at any given time, right? I think that ends up being pretty massive as far as, you know, just deciding what's going on there. So... yeah, and Shambler's also putting some helpful stuff in the chat there. Even so, like, I don't think this kind of strategy should be outlawed, you know, by the balance or whatever. I think it's totally fine that something like this can happen. It's creative, it's interesting, it makes for very exciting openers, and it would even be better if both players could reliably transition out of it depending on how well it's repulsed or whatever. I actually think at higher skill it probably wouldn't be viable, because you can scout it, and then you know that there's like certain things you can do against it depending on your race. Like I said in the game that it was happening in, DF could just waypoint his Drakenid behind the mineral line, and suddenly you heckle Droleths forever because the only enemy unit that's there is the Lekizalisk, which you can outrange some workers from no matter what position it's in. So you can just keep dancing it while you get your embassy up for detection. So that would be one example of like how you can abuse that. And in a way, I would say that even applies when there is no ledge, when you burrow the Lekizalisk on the same ground, where obviously it could be revealed. I think the same thing applies there, because it's pretty much guaranteed to get some damage if it gets into your base. But the answer then becomes, this guy's going for a very, like, basically guaranteed damage, but he's also being very weak at home. Therefore, my answer is either minimize the damage as much as possible and then win based on economy, because he's sacrificed so much economy, or try to do the same thing to a lesser extent because I have some units in his base doing more damage to him, like do more damage than he does to me, basically. Those are one of your, those are the two options, because he's hurting himself by doing it to begin with. But yeah, indeed, beyond that, there is still like the questions of how this economy system works and how many workers do you really have, and like scouting your opponent and all that. And all the races have access to different methods of scouting that I think are interesting. Certainly something that I'm eager to see happen as time moves on, is like how this sort of thing evolves and develops. Specifically, in fact, the changes that I made to Crossguard probably still allow for a Lekizalisk drop in that position, but specifically they stop, buildings being deployed there. So that might be something else that I revisit, that maybe that exact position that you can drop in to heckle quite so many workers is the problem, or is more of a problem. Whereas like if I make it, you choose between heckling a couple workers and committing to a position on the same ground, that might be more balanced or whatever. But either way, I agree that the counterplay is kind of lame in certain situations, but fundamentally things like that, where you choose between minimizing damage dealt and winning by having a more standard, build order or opening strategy, versus doing more damage than is done to you. I think that is an interesting dichotomy, and I wouldn't want to outlaw and balance away any opportunity for something like that to happen. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that before we close this stream out. Mess.
I think it's just going to come down to like really specific interactions. Like
right.
Normally the Obelisk Lekizalisk has a lot of risk associated with it.
Yes, yeah.
But in this specific case, because you can just sit on a ledge and you can't stand units on it without, for the other races, building an entirely different structure that is generally quite expensive and then waiting for a transport. Meanwhile, you're denied from mining gas and potentially taking a lot of other damage in the process. That's the kind of interaction you would want to avoid. But that's like a really specific case, because that's what the map enables. So I think that you would address like specific cases like that. rather than trying to destroy the entire process, unless through the process of continually experiencing it and seeing all of its nuances, then you would conclude that there is nothing really to salvage from this gameplay-wise. Then you would consider maybe making Obeliths tier 2 or require a structure or something. But usually when you're looking at stuff like this, you try to look at all of the aggravating factors and, you know, deal like what aggravating factor really enables that makes this really annoying. Well, in this case, that's just the map. It's not really the whole process of being able to go this kind of thing altogether. It's just the map makes it, you know, dumber than average compared to the other maps. Because, you know, that's the case with a lot of these maps is the mains tend to be really, really vulnerable. Like the other one I think would be Wellington. I think it's Wellington with the
There's a bunch of ledges all over the place, yeah.
Yeah, so hypothetically you could do something similar to there where the Lekizlis can't be attacked, but that's a lower level, so the Obelith actually would have to spot for the Lekizlis, and I don't think it's at quite as good of a position as in this map. I don't think it has much reach across the resource line, and I don't know if it can even hit the gas from there at all. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it might only be... It gives you more mineral surface area for sure, but I don't think it gives you as much... definitely doesn't give you as much, you know, room for that. So, but even then, like, you also have to fly basically over the base, and you can't really take a hidden... Well, I guess you probably could. You could wrap all the way around, so maybe not. I was going to say maybe the path there is easier than in Crossguard, or harder than in Crossguard to avoid from your opponent, but it might actually be more open, or about the same to the point where it's a wash. I had the thought recently that we probably want to scrub a lot of the maps that we currently use in the map pool, and just sort of default back to a more safe, easier to hold, like sort of a concept of some of these maps. For the longest time, I've wanted to experiment with things like, you know, destroy this to open up the pathways or whatever, destructible cocks. But at the same time, it's like AI just can't navigate around those at all. So, or, you know, having doors that, like the installation doors, where you actually can control an area and raise and lower them based on like some command that you issue or something. Like that could be interesting. But being able to actually do that is, you know, who knows how easy that would realistically be to, you know, implement, because it's not just AI that can't navigate it, but it's your own unit movement. Like if you task a unit to go to the opposite side of a path that's blocked by a building or a doodad that you can destroy, your unit will just spin instead of actually navigating there around it. So it's not like you're actually going to get value as a player from that either. It's definitely, you know, pretty risky to try to do something like that, where basically the game doesn't work. And pros in Brood War just work around this. Like, they, as best they can, right? There's I can't remember, again, I can't remember that. It might be like Nemesis or something, where there's a Twilight map where you have the situation where you have two neutral aquifers or assimilators and neutral eggs. If you destroy the eggs, any unit can move through. If you destroy one aquifer, it turns into a geyser, and then at that point, one, like small units can move through. And if you destroy both assimilators, then no units can move through. But when no units can move through, the units just fucking spin. And like pro players have to deal with this because I don't like that's apparently acceptable or something. To me, that wouldn't be acceptable, but it might still, you know, be interesting to experiment with something like that and see if you can mitigate the problems instead of just not being allowed to access something like that. As far as you know, if we could actually basically have the pathfinding regions recalculate mid-game, even if it would be an expensive process, it might be worth to try to experiment with that.
The way you learn why things work or don't work, or how they contribute, is by trying them.
Yeah.
Like, the Brood War map pool evolved a lot over the years, and it's just because people find things that, you know, the maps just make certain stuff really cancerous to deal with.
Right.
And that's how you learn. Like, you wouldn't know these things unless you were trying them. There's not really too much point you can reference other than Brood War. But at this stage, even the early game in this is so much different, and the ranges between units is so much more varied. And the things you can do tech path-wise, and the way the scouting is done is so different that you can't even really look too much at the way Brood War does mapping either, because even a lot of like Brood War maps would be really broken in CMBW as it is right now.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, we will be hopping up between streams. And in a short time, about maybe it looks like 10 minutes from now or such. Yeah, in about 10 minutes, we'll be back with semifinal number 2 between Mystery Meat and Benno. So join us for that, and we will be back to continue the playoffs. Of course, assuming everybody can actually play afterwards, the grand final will just take place immediately. We'll see how that works out, and we'll catch you soon.